When we look to the skies in Elden Ring, it's hard for our view not to be blocked by the magnanimous Erd Tree and the towering golden bough that blesses the land with its light, so much so that even the sun itself is barely visible even on the brightest of days. But if we are able to venture to small pockets of the world where the Erd Tree's branches can't reach, there we can find a blanket of stars, hidden beyond the clouds, and a plethora of mysteries waiting to be explored. Today I want to dive into some of those cosmic mysteries, through the lens of one inhabitant of the lands between specifically, in an attempt to understand a fundamental aspect of our game's world. Today we're taking a look at the Alabaster and Onyx Lords, because these characters, possibly more so than any other, play a critical role in helping us understand what lies beyond the stars in Elden Ring, and who actually holds all the power. So as we get into that today, if you enjoy all things Elden Ring, and want to stay up to date on the news, lore, and discussion, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. When talking about these mysteries, the best place to begin our discussion is always with what we explicitly know. Starting off with basic visual observation, there's a lot to unpack in appearance alone. These creatures are two sides of the same coin, being virtually identical in appearance, aside from their color, where the Onyx Lords are dark and the Alabaster Lords are white. They're both very tall and lanky in appearance, with long white hair and sharp pointed ears. Their skin is also very odd in appearance, for a reason described in the Onyx Lord Greatsword item description, which reads, "Greatsword forged from golden-hued meteoric ore. The blade conceals gravity-manipulating magic. A weapon unique to the Onyx Lords, a race of ancients with skin of stone who were said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago." And that tells us a lot about the nature of these beings. We can see a colorless vein running along the left side of their chest, much like the appearance of rocks all over the lands between. And that raises a few questions that we'll address in a second, but what we can make of this is that these are corpses of an unknown time, risen to life thanks to a meteor. Now, one thing that did catch my attention about their physical appearance is that although we are in a fantasy setting, one thing that's entirely unique to these lords are their pointed ears, which is a factor that may help us identify who they might have been before their resurrection, but it's an interesting detail to say the least. Now, one other very observable trait of the Alabaster and Onyx Lords is their use of gravitational magic, and this is one trait that separates the two types of lords. The Alabaster Lords use spells that attract the target to them, while the Onyx Lords use repulsion spells. Now, the reason they are depicted as opposites is for a number of reasons, one of which is to symbolize the opposite polarities of magnetism, and we've discussed at length a while back how gravity magic is often depicted as magnetism, not only through its sigil being the symbol of a magnetic field, but also its ability to push and pull, while in reality gravity only pulls toward a center. Now, another reason the lords are depicted as opposites is because of the other spell they use, Meteorites. The Meteorites item description reads, "One of the glintstone sorceries that manipulates gravitational forces, summons a void that emits a rain of small meteorites. The sorcery originates from the Onyx Lords, who had skin of stone, and were called lords in reverential fear of their destructive power." Smoughtown makes a fantastic observation about this spell that we're going to briefly cover here, but if you want a much more in-depth analysis on these cosmic features, check out his video on Estelle and the Cosmos that I'll have linked down below. But the main thing that separates this spell from the other types of gravity magic is that it opens a portal into a void, meaning that these meteorites are coming from somewhere physically else. Now, in Smoughtown's video, he discussed the theorized concept of black holes and white holes creating wormholes, connections across space-time, allowing for travel across very vast distances of space. And this is why the lords are represented by black and white and able to summon these meteorites, opening up wormholes to the void beyond. Now, it does appear that creatures that originate from beyond this void have these powers innately, whereas the Alabaster and Onyx Lords gained this power after their resurrection from the meteors, relying on glintstone rather than their own connection to the void. Now, meteors are an important part of Elden Ring's lore, with the Elden Beast itself said to have arrived on one in a similar fashion. Now, one place we find these Alabaster and Onyx Lords are around various impact craters we can find across the lands between. Now, if we take a look at the meteorites inside these craters, we can see that they're filled with a golden mineral, one that's shimmering and luminescent. And on a side note, all these impact craters follow the same order, with one large crater in the center where the Lord emerges and 8 small craters circling it from the outside. side, which is oddly the same symbol as the Eye of the Fell God in the Fire Giant, so for some reason there's a connection there. And I may have a theory we'll explore in a minute. But on the topic of meteorites, one notable location we fight an Onyx Lord is before a divine tower atop a very large meteorite that's enshrined at the bottom of a mine. And if we slay this lord and continue on the path, journeying up the divine towers, we'll notice a lot of similarities. Many of these meteorites are placed inside the towers themselves in a reverential fashion. These appear to be the same exact kind of meteorites we can find in the impact craters, although they do seem to have lost a bit of their luster. Now the question that's raised after this is, why are these meteorites so important to be a significant decoration in the Divine Tower? Now, one thing that's always stuck out to me about the Divine Towers is that they're full of cosmic patterns. It's almost as if there's a power of the stars that's surging through the tower, evidenced by the star-like rocks in the walls and the wispy trails that follow the elevator down. There's something very abnormal here, and it's a power that's not in use anywhere else, and I do think the source of that power are the meteorites. For example, after slaying Radahn, we can see tons of stars and meteors shoot across the sky, and if we go to the location of impact, we can see a massive gravitational anomaly with massive boulders hundreds of feet in the air. We can also see an example of the meteorite's power in the Ruin's Greatsword, which was nothing more than rubble on the ground, but gained incredible power after being struck by a meteor. Now we could also explore the power of Estelle and the falling star beasts as evidence of just how powerful these meteorites and things from beyond the void are, but I simply want to illustrate that this is an insane force to be reckoned with when it comes to factors in the lands between. And if these meteorites contain even a residual amount of that power, then we can see why the Alabaster and Onyx Lords were so feared, and why these meteorites are so important, even enough to be worshipped by inhabitants of the world. But there is perhaps no greater example of this power than the Star Scourge Radahn, who was, by learning the magic and power of the Alabaster and Onyx Lords, able to hold back the stars themselves, and prevent any further threats from beyond the void. The description of Gravity Well reads, a gravitational technique studied by the young Radahn. His master was an Alabaster Lord with skin of stone. This is continued in the Collapsing Stars description, which reads, a gravitational technique mastered by the young Radahn. I thank you for your tutelage, for now I can challenge the stars. And this tells us a few things, notably that the Alabaster Lords are capable of speech, as well as teaching their magic to others. And the question that follows is, well, if the Lords are drawing their power from these meteorites in the void, then why would they teach Radahn the means of halting that? I'm not sure I have an exact answer to that question, but one thing that's interesting that we can find is over in Caria Manor. Behind the Three Sisters, past a graveyard, is the Royal Grave Everjail, and here, locked away ironically by gravity magic itself, is an Onyx Lord. One conclusion we could possibly draw from this is that since we know Radahn's Star Scourge halted the fate of the Carians, namely Ranni, that the Lords were punished for sharing their magic, or having such power in the first place. However, if you go to Raya Lucaria and explore around the graveyard section, you'll encounter an Alabaster Lord, not an Onyx Lord, and this one is guarding the Gravity Well spell, which was the spell that talked about Radahn learning from an Alabaster Lord. Now the picture that this paints, and the conclusion that a player may naturally draw, is that Alabaster Lord was Radahn's mentor. However, we do know that Radahn didn't learn gravity magic at Raya Lucaria, but instead at Celia, the town of sorcery. So the question I have is, why is an Alabaster Lord in Raya Lucaria, but an Onyx Lord locked up in Caria Manor? I'm not sure I have the answer to that one. And it leads to other questions that we still don't have explicit answers for, such as who made the Everjails? Why do they use gravity magic? And if the Alabaster and Onyx Lords are such a sophisticated species, why do they only spend their time in search of meteorites and aimlessly wandering? I think the answer to most of these questions lies in a word we talked about earlier, that these lords are ancients. Let's take a look at the Divine Tower of Limgrave, one of the only divine towers with its bridge still intact in the original iconography. Along this bridge we can find numerous inanimate bodies of golems, but there are a few that are still active, guarding the Divine Tower. The golem Greatbow reads, Great bow of black stone crafted by a civilization now gone to ruin. And let's think about these golems for a second. They have a definite connection to the Divine Towers, are themselves stone given life, and are relics of an ancient era, much like our are Alabaster and Onyx lords. The only other creatures that we know of from a bygone era are the giants, whose skeletons are so old they've become fossilized into the earth. And since the original Elden Ring map depicted the world as a giant impact crater, I think it's possible the original Onyx and Alabaster lords predate that cataclysmic event when a new outer god took over, and now their worship of those meteors and the impact craters resembling the fell god remind them of that bygone era, and the gravitational magic may only be a sliver of the power the original meteors held, and now they search for that true power that has since been lost to time. But the facts surrounding these creatures are so few and far between that we really have no way of knowing. As of now, this is all just a theory I have. Honestly, it feels like Elden Ring forgot to talk about these guys. There's just so many missing pieces of a very fascinating story, but maybe we'll learn more about them in DLC. Anyways though guys, that is going to pretty much do it for the video today. I hope you learned a little bit about the Alabaster and Onyx lords, and let me know down below what you think. But if you did enjoy today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. And with all that, I will catch you in the next one.